Ladies and gentlemen, good day and welcome to the Delta Report on this Monday, the 22nd of August, 2022. Thank you for tuning in. I'm glad to have you guys here. I'm going to tell you guys what. I did shows on this going back for about probably the last 3-4 years where I was saying that what we would be seeing in the future is a massive increase in homelessness. And I said that probably near the major cities in the United States and elsewhere in other countries, we'd see homeless encampments spring up that would appear to be like small cities. We're seeing it now. And it's going to get a lot worse very soon. But there's other things that come with all of this that we got to watch out for. And one of the things is something called civil unrest. Some people don't realize exactly what is civil unrest. It's when the general populace out there is unhappy. And oftentimes what makes them the most unhappy is when they don't have any food to eat. Energy can do it too. If they go cold in the wintertime and there's no way to warm themselves, this can cause it. And basically the general population, meaning the majority of the people out there, are finding things hard, maybe hard to stay warm in the wintertime, or maybe they're hungry, or maybe they're a combination of both. And they just get to a point where they say, well, we're not going to take this anymore. And they leave their house. And it's hard to tell exactly what they're going to do. Perhaps they will march in the street. Perhaps they will march against the government. Perhaps they will be peaceful. Or perhaps not. And oftentimes through history, as a history lesson for us, they have not been peaceful. In fact, sometimes they can actually even turn against their own government and take the government down. One of the notable examples in modern history of this is what happened in Romania with a leader called Ceausescu. His government fell very quickly. He tried to get away, to escape the people, but the people caught up with him. And let's just say it didn't go well for him in this situation. This is what can happen under civil unrest. So we're entering into a period of history right now where it's almost like a perfect storm for civil unrest around the world. And we're going to cover some of the topics of this issue. So let me take a look here, and I'm going to read a few things for you. Now, this was an article I found in Zero Hedge this morning, written by Von Greyers. He says, this is the autumn of an epic asset collapse and higher inflation. What it means for your average people out there, it means poverty and social unrest or civil unrest. The world economy, and especially the political and economic situation today, consists of a potpourri of lethal ingredients which have dire consequences. Debts are at levels that can never be repaid, sovereign, corporate, and private. There's epic global bubbles out there in stocks, bonds, property. It's all about to collapse. Major geopolitical conflicts with no desire for peace. He goes on to list major wars are very likely. Energy imbalances and shortages. Most of them are self-inflicted. Or I would go on to add here that some of them are inflicted by war itself, because let's take a look at this and examine this for a second. If a country's at war with another country, why would they want to continue to supply them with energy or even food or items like that? Of course, they're going to withdraw that support. They're even going to withdraw items that they'd normally sell to a country like that. So we got food shortages leading to major famines, civil unrest, inflation leading to hyperinflation, global poverty, political and economic corruption in the United States, Europe, and most countries. And it says no country will be able to afford Social Security, medical, or pension payments. So countries out there will just not be able to. Well, their currency is not really money. See, first off, this is one of the biggest problems that we have out there in the entire world. Is what we call money is not money. Some of you out in my audience right now are probably hearing this for the first time and saying, Glenn, what the heck are you talking about? Money is not money. Well, it used to be paper. Now it's not even that. Now it's a digital ledger. It doesn't even exist. It's being used for payments. Yes. When you go to the grocery store and you slip that little card out, that's a ledger. They're just basically saying, hey, you know, he just paid $100 for his groceries. They take $100 off of the other number. So they have a number that they've set for you and at your bank or whatever. It's just digits on a screen. It doesn't mean anything. It's absolutely meaningless in the real world. And then we call that money. And it's just digits. It's about as real as World of Warcraft money that the kids play with. I don't know if your kids, or video game money that your kids play with. That's how real your money is. It used to be paper, and at least it did have some sort of a paper value. Okay, back when it was paper, you could say paper is worth, I don't know, maybe $200 a ton for paper. Pulp price. Pulp, the price of pulp. Because that's what paper comes from. They have pulp mills. They used to have them up and down the rivers, you know. They used to put a pulp mill on the river. They had big smokestacks on it. They used to take lumber there. They used to put the lumber on a machine that would chew it to pieces. Very fine. And then they'd put it in a big vat and they'd mix chemicals in with it and stuff. And they'd turn it and churn it and churn it until they made like this soup. They would actually turn logs of wood into like a soupy thing, soupy stuff. And then they'd press it down to sheets and dry it. And they'd make different types of paper. This is how paper's always been made. A lot of people don't know that. Pulp, wood pulp. They pulp. They've actually beat the log or beat a piece of wood until it makes pulp. And pulp is like they actually liquefy it. And then they press it and they dry it and it makes paper. And so paper has a price. It's worth so much per ton. But now they've switched this money, what we call money, into something called polymer. And once it's in that polymer form, it's practically useless. So it doesn't even have a paper value. It is absolutely worthless. And that's when your money is even polymer. Not even polymer anymore. Now it's just digits on the screen. What do you got? You got nothing. Here. Sorry to tell you this, but the only thing that gives that money value is the government says it has value. It says it can be used for trade. This is called by decree. We hereby declare that that money has value. And now we're going to print endless quantities of it. And we expect it to retain its value. Oh, now it's not retaining its value. Oh, it's losing value every year. What are they going to do? The way the whole system is structured, they have to constantly create new digit monetary units because it's a credit-based system. It'll collapse if they don't. But at the same time, they're saying, okay, now we're not going to print any more of these monetary units, but they can only do that for a little while until the jig is up. And then they have to start to print again. And then, of course, that's what we call inflation. It's a hidden tax on you, losing value. So he goes on to say here, so what are the governments around the world going to do to solve these problems? Nothing, of course. They're just going to let these problems get worse and worse. So what's the net effect going to be for you? Is what's coming next down the pike? Well, I forecast out in advance that we were going to have these homelessness was going to increase. We're going to have actually homeless cities. Now what I'm forecasting to you guys is we are going to have food shortages. I believe that in places like North America, here, and what we call the first world, countries that have been very rich, we're going to have food shortages, but we're not going to starve to death. I don't think we're going to starve to death. But food prices are going to get astronomically high, even in the first world countries. Third world countries, very likely some people could starve to death. In fact, it's already starting. The United States right now is buying food, trying to buy food for Africa. Because they're actually on the edge of verge of starting to starve to death in places in Africa. But these food shortages are going to grow. And what's going to be the major result of this is something called civil unrest. You're very likely, in a year or so from now, going to see cars upside down in the street where people have basically flipped them upside down, burning in the street. Maybe not even being cleaned up because it might be so widespread. Possible power outages and stores that are going to start to go empty in particular regions. Some regions the stores will the power will stay on, the stores might keep food in them. Other regions where there's a lot of civil unrest, you might not see any food in the grocery stores. And it could come to your area. It could create a situation to the point where you're saying to yourself, should I get the heck out of here? Because maybe there's restless mobs roaming the streets right in your town right now where it's peaceful. Look outside in front of your house right now. It's peaceful, right? Maybe this time next year it won't be where you're at. Or maybe it will be. Maybe you'll have to move to a peaceful area. And whose fault is all of this? I'm going to put the fault right where the fault lies. It's government. They ultimately are going to create a situation that's so untenable in the end that you might not survive it. And it's because the people are allowing them to do this to you. They're doing this to you. At what point? It almost reminds me of a situation that a lot of women face, in abusive relationships. They'll stay, but there's a certain point where they say, hey, you know what? If I stay here any longer, my life might be in jeopardy. But they don't really want to leave because maybe they still love the person that they're with. This is a conundrum that does face, some women are faced by this conundrum. And in the end, they have to get out of an abusive relationship because, and not just women, okay, to be politically correct, this situation does happen, but it most often happens with women. It does happen in other relationships as well. To be politically correct, because I might get some people on the show might say, hey, Glenn, this is not just exclusive to women. And yes, I'll agree. But it's a situation of domestic abuse that can arise, and sometimes this is almost the same thing. It actually is the same thing, but we're all being abused by these governments. And in a while, down the road, because of the system they've laid out for us, how untenable this system is, how corrupt this system is, how this system is non-sustainable in the long term, eventually it's going to get so bad that we're going to need something new. And if we're not smart, we're going to end up in something that's worse than what we got. What we got is a frying pan right now. And if we're not careful, we could end up in the fire. We got to create a new system for ourselves that is fair and equitable for all humanity, not just for the chosen few, so that they can enrich themselves through corruption and leave all the others in a state of utter poverty, to the point where we can't raise our children in peace and security. You know? And the time is coming up where we're going to hit this crossroads that if we continue, I don't think, actually, if we were to continue with this down to its final conclusion, I don't think any humans would survive. Not even the chosen few who deem themselves above the law in this situation, because they make the law, for lawmakers. And why we would put somebody in that kind of a responsible position where they can actually make the law so that they can break the law. It's an idiotic type system that we have running right now in the world. To the point where a lot of people are questioning, do we even need government? Why do we even need government? They've abused the government. Our own government has abused not just the system. They don't just play the system and they've become proficient at it, but they've played us to the point where at this point we have to question our own survival in the future and the survival of our children. Thank you for listening to my show. Like and subscribe, and we'll catch you guys in the very next episode. Bye-bye.